You're listening to episode 29, Tokyo Godfathers, the best looking trash you've ever seen, where I'll be covering the 2003 Japanese Christmas film by famed director Satoshi Kon. This is where the intro would go if I ever actually sat down with Deathstroke to make it. Yo, welcome to The World is My Burrito, a podcast where I provide your wandering ears with a comfy home in the domicile that is my voice. As always, this is your host, Corey T, coming at you from Tampa, Florida on this lovely December 11th, 2024. If you're coming from the Wait For It podcast, thanks for tuning in. That was the easy part. Now for the gun show. If you're not coming from there, well then go check out Phil and Eric's much more entertaining review. It's a big player later, but as serendipity would have it, our podcasts decided to cover this at the same time, completely independent of each other. So this is like an impromptu two-parter with them that just so happens to make my life a little bit easier. Let's clean this place up with some dish duty. I have made some guest appearances despite my disappearances here. If you want to hear some great content, check out Podcasters Assemble episode of The Boy and the Heron, Cinema Villains Jason episode, the Neatcasts 12 Rants of Christmas, and keep an eye out for the upcoming Milk and Cookies sequel. I'm a little sorry for not having more content out this year. Parts of this year were crazy, but parts were very controllable. I don't know if it was Carol and Tuesday or the Mars Madness thing or just picking a topic I couldn't sink my teeth into, but something kind of burnt me out in the bored way. I guess not really the burnt out way, just like bored. Then with Hurricane's work, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and other stuff got in the way. I also kind of screwed myself over on a Podcasters Assemble episode that I took charge of, which still needs to be completely restarted. Really hoping for a Christmas miracle on that one. As a reminder, one of the most important parts of podcasting is writing the first sentence, which I haven't done in a while, and it really felt nice to do that for today's topic. Enough mopey recollection, boys, let's go. Synopsis. On Christmas Eve, 3 homeless people living on the streets of Shinjuku, Tokyo, discover a newborn baby among the trash and set out to find its parents. Hot take, it's an amazing movie based in a sad reality, yet isn't sad. Humanizing characters who would overtly be marginalized in reality. You should watch it, especially if you're in the LGBTQ community. Especially if you aren't. Why did I choose this topic? Well, it's Christmas time, and this movie features a lot of Christmas spirit. I hadn't actually seen it until 2023 or 2022, despite being very aware of its existence since young adulthood. While part of me regrets not seeing this much younger, I think adult me got a far more important journey out of this. One of the big sparks to the fire that became this episode was learning that this used the framework from an old American Western movie, which we'll very lightly get into. Now let's mosey right on over to creator history. If you don't know of the legendary Satoshi Kon, then I don't know what to tell you. Which is a lie because this entire thing is scripted. You are a beast of the earth. Educate yourself, or let me do it. Born October 12th, 1963, he wanted to become an animator, so he took the graphic design course at Musashino Art University from 82 to 87, where he published short stories and serialized manga, eventually getting recognition in 1984 by Kodansha's Young magazine, awarding him runner-up for his short piece Toriko. During this tenure, Katsuhiro Otomo of Akira fame occasionally brought him in to work on the Akira manga serialization, then layout art and setting for Rojin Z, and even used one of Kon's ideas to create the live-action film World Apartment Horror, finally bringing him on to head the Magnetic Rose story in the anthology Memories. Some of his other directorial credits are Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, Paranoia Agent, and then post Tokyo Godfathers, Paprika. Some of his other things that he's worked on, he was on Jinro, The Wolf Brigade, Patlabor 2, the movie, Master Keaton, and then he did episodes 5 and 6 of the 94 JoJo's Bizarre Adventure OVA. So like the most popular episodes from that OVA. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2010 due to pancreatic cancer, leaving unfinished the film he'd been working on for a few years. Damn shame. So, moving right along into world history. Before getting into this, I am trying my damnedest to be as respectful and accurate as possible, but have long accepted the difficult reality that comes with speaking about not just another culture, but the very foreign to me lifestyles of peoples I can't even personally relate to in America. These are not my reality, but they are someone's. Homeless history in Japan is a great place to start because it's at the forefront of this tale. Some of these points and problems are similar to the US, so keep that in mind when you see homeless people. The blanket struggle of not having a fixed address means you can't get a job, driver's license, passport, or be part of the National Healthcare Registry. The origin of this is due to the economic bubble bursting. There was a steady increase of homeless in the 90s caused by a loss of an informal day labor system that had been going strong since post-World War II. Basically, dudes would line up outside of construction areas or maybe a particular area of town. This description was a little flimsy, and some of the definitions have been adopted elsewhere now. But job brokers from construction companies would hire these people to work. Now imagine in this time frame, you built the metropolis of Tokyo, then you're being pushed onto the streets, overshadowed by the very buildings you built and judged by the people occupying them. One of the papers I read also stated that most landlords demand 6 months rent up front. So once you become homeless, it's difficult to secure a place, at least where you currently are in this city. This does sound wild at first, but we're talking about Tokyo, so honestly, I could totally believe that. Now, one of the better research articles I found was a study on Ueno, located less than 5 miles or 8 kilometers from Shinjuku. So this is not specific to the film's location, but relevant. In 98 and 99, Ueno Park had roughly 300 blue tarp tents with a nondescript quantity of residents. There were roughly 1,000 to 1,200 homeless on benches, under awnings, or on streets. The first national government survey of Japan's homeless population was conducted in 2003, listing 25,296 homeless persons in Japan, with 5,927 living throughout Tokyo's 23 wards. Most were men over 50, with an average of about 50% living in tents, train stations, parks, riversides, and on streets, for an average of about 49 months. This does not account for the nomadic homeless. Depending on the study group, women make up between 3 to 10% of the national population. Why this discrepancy? Because of the patriarchy. The national survey views homelessness as a male problem. One of the leading causes of women ending up on the street is broken marriages. You can't have homeless without some good old-fashioned prejudice. Japan as a whole has measures in place to attempt to help the homeless, but are not a requirement. Tokyo and other metropolitan areas intentionally try to keep them separate. Aggressive architecture, wood nailed onto benches to prevent sleep, and water fountains turned off so they can't gather or bathe are just some of the things that they have in effect there. TV news and articles refer to them as the other Japan, or the other side of Japan, or the unsalaried man, which is a play on the salaryman, like archetype, class. This blatant misrepresentation makes them targets of violence. School children and others would verbally harass, strike with rocks, throw firecrackers, stab, or set them on fire. On the realistic end, homeless may infight, but rarely is there a headline of them attacking non-homeless. They don't make an area less safe despite news outlets doing a little bit of fear-mongering. In Ueno Park, state and local officials would boot homeless out of the park once a month on an announced date. The homeless would pack up and leave for the day, then return that night. The final little bit here is that some areas require the homeless to pack up every day. This leads to a very weird lifestyle and relationship called homeresu o suru, or doing homeless. Doing homeless was the means through which homeless people rejected their social marginality and displayed their morality, hard work, determination, honor, perseverance, and manliness. On one hand, it involved recycling, scavenging, day labor, and resale. On the other hand, it involved their cooking with stoves, hygiene, and clean laundry. These two were combined to maintain neighborly relationships. They could coexist with businesses, people, and shine a positive light on other homeless. Ueno residents prided themselves and pushed their neighbors to live up to a standard of virtue. Earlier, I mentioned officials kicking homeless out of parks, which became a point of pride for those who could quickly and neatly pack up. Those who had it down would scoff at those disorganized and cluttered. There's some fluidity about how this lifestyle came about. One article made it sound like a conclusion the homeless arrived at, while another makes it sound like it's prompted by activists. Honestly, it could be a little bit of both depending on tons of factors. Now, it shouldn't surprise anyone that classism exists within classism. For context, Tokyo Godfathers takes place in Shinjuku, about 1,800 feet or 550 meters beneath Ueno. Ueno is up on a hill, and they would call themselves Yamano Ningen, or people of the mountain, referring to those in the valley as Shita no Ho, or down there. A few of the things that separated them were that the people in Shinjuku don't cook with stoves, they don't make an effort to bathe, they don't do laundry, they make no effort to properly do homeless, and they would deign to line up for soup offered by churches. The reason why this was an issue is that the Yamano Ningen felt like the church insulted them by making them listen to long sermons just to feed them soupy rice. This was perfectly displayed in our film's intro. One last distinguishing class, I guess, were the kojiki, or bums. The ill-mannered ones who rifled through rather than doing things orderly, and generally mess with the reputation built by those who practiced doing homeless. And we ain't done yet, because now we gotta talk about trans history. Hana is exclusively and jokingly referred to as a homo if subtitles are to be believed, though her words elicit a trans woman. Most articles and papers will refer to her in kind. There weren't a ton of interviews or English studies going on around the time this movie was made, so some of the points to come may be slightly more modern takes. While I generally like to keep things in line with the time period, this needs to be addressed somewhere. And if there's one thing you can learn from this, it's that Hana grew up in a world less accepting than what I'm going to describe. I did goof in searching, so this is from an article about trans men when it should have been trans women as referenced in the film, but it is still enlightening and there is likely some crossover. To stop you from goofing, trans men are those who are assigned female at birth and undergo surgery to become male. Swap some of those words around for trans women. Final disclaimer, don't view the opinions, lifestyles, and struggles of every LGBTQ community through the lens of Western European societies. In fact, just assume if you ain't living in that country, you have no idea what it's like. Could be better, could be worse, could be weird as shit by your standards. Much of this is coming from a 2017 to 2018 study by Shu Min-yuen of a trans male crowd in Tokyo. Clearly, this is not law, and everyone's experience can vary, a point Yuen upholds. For daily life, the trans hide in plain sight as gender normative, but attend private events where they are very open. While Japan has those who fight for the political status quo, the magazine Laugh and many interviewed push the ideology I am normal without the desire to fight what normal is. The choice to live normally and not fight the system while attending private events is a strategy to adopt and gain self-validation and social membership as both trans and men or women. Dead names and images of past identity aren't viewed as bad, and they're something that is freely talked about and shown if you ask. In 1996, gender or sex reassignment surgery became recognized as the legal appropriate medical treatment for the condition of gender identity disorder. A year after this movie, trans people gained the right to change their gender in the Koseki Family Register, the official Japanese registry system, after fulfilling sex reassignment and a few other conditions. One of those conditions is that they be without child. The Japanese term seidoitsusei shogai was adopted from our term gender identity disorder straight from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders published by the American Psychiatric Association. Japan is weird, okay? And they find weird ways to oppress people. We here in the US are definitely not without our faults, and as a nation feel the need to proudly advertise them, so some of this might sound familiar. The nation does this thing where it tries to convince its people that it is homogenous and has no minorities, resulting in the belief that ethnic and cultural differences do not belong in Japanese society. The country that liberated an entire writing system, forced its way into a ton of nearby nations, and mostly used the word miruku or milk instead of gyunyu has somehow remained culturally pure. They also have a social construct in place to live harmoniously with, quote, foreigners and ethnic others. I guess I should say, for like the previous minorities comment, this is something that happened after the fact. This is like recognizing their existence, but reminding them they're not an influence. But this excludes dealing with people inside their perfect society with disabilities and gender variance. Does that sound confusing? Because it is. It's what some here in America would call fucking stupid. The Exceptional Treatment Law was promulgated in 2004, signifying the state's recognition of trans people as ordinary citizens who are deserving of rights, but also renders them governable, abiding by the policies of people who do not and will not understand trans realities. There is now a legally correct way to be trans. This is also where they are forced to accept the medical classification of gender identity disorder. That's not all bad, right? Just a little mental disorder on your public profile. Well, public universities, funded by the same government that accepts gender reassignment, don't allow for name changes on certificates, meaning that not only are certificates rendered useless, but everything is connected, meaning you can be traced back to your former self, possibly leading to the exclusion it attempts to avoid. There was an anecdote in this study about someone who got rejected because the university knew its students would treat the person like shit when they inevitably, easily discovered all of their life changes. All this info, and I still have no idea what the relationship is between gay and trans people. So, nothing. In this movie, it doesn't seem to be that bad. It kind of goes in hand. I did happen to notice really the only time gay or homosexual is ever used, it was in the general classification of like not viewed positively in Japan. This is a good point to get off the depressing train. There's so much more discussion and research to be had here, but I think you get the gist. Also, I have a shitload of links. Moving on to anime history. Khan wrote a blog post about his ideas for Tokyo Godfather 4 months before Millennium Actress had even released. In it, he mentions how the budget, studio, and director of the next movie were all set in stone before there was even a story. The original idea was going to be titled Tokyo Ghost, and it was either going to be about a homeless man meeting a ghost or a post-World War II film where defeated Japanese soldiers team up with Indonesia to assist in their fight for independence, thus helping the Japanese regain their reason to live. As it happens, that film had already been released 2 years prior as Merdeka 17805. You would never guess in a million years, but a film glorifying their oppressors as heroes did not go over well with the Indonesians. Fast forward to the early 2000s when Kon felt like departing from his previous storytelling that blended dreams and reality, as exemplified in Perfect Blue and Millennium Actress. Through a wild series of events, a lot of serendipity, he ended up watching 3 Godfathers. I'll go into that really quick because it is the primary reference. 3 Godfathers is a 1948 Western retelling by director John Ford of the biblical Three Wise Men, starring Pedro Armendariz, maybe, Harry Carey Jr., and some guy you've probably never heard of by the name of John Wayne. The synopsis goes as such. Three bank robbers on the run risk their freedom and lives to return a newborn to civilization. It's set in Arizona within 10 years of 1862 and runs an hour and 48 minutes. Didn't care for it. Starts strong by never saying the quiet stuff out loud, and then the more it goes on, it just starts beating you overhead with the quiet part. There's a whole section of it that just feels like a really dry SNL skit. I didn't like it. You can make your own decisions. But in his words from interviews, Kon noticed the increased number of homeless people in Tokyo, and that was the reason I wanted to focus on them this time as the main characters. As I am an animation writer/creator, I wanted to send my message to viewers throughout this feature to make them feel relieved of their troubles, worries, and discontentment from everyday life by using the homeless characters, who are a socially disadvantaged people that are living their lives vitally and lively with warmth and kindness in their hearts. Another quote is, "I wanted to examine how someone separated from mainstream society would once again rejuvenate society." Another quote, "The important thing wasn't to just present the homeless problem in the script, but to focus on the mindset surrounding things we discard." Tokyo Godfathers is a tragic comedy out of Studio Madhouse that released in Japan on November 8th, 2003, and in North America on January 16th, 2004. Satoshi Kon directed and wrote the original screenplay, but had a dope right-hand woman in the form of Keiko Nobumoto, screenwriter from Cowboy Bebop, creator of Wolf's Rain, and scriptwriter for Space Dandy and Carol and Tuesday. The animation director was Kenichi Konishi, who worked on a bunch of Studio Ghibli stuff, several of Kon's other projects, Evangelion. He's got a good list. Music was by Keiichi Suzuki and the band he co-founded, Moonriders. A lot of great artists worked on this film, and I highly recommend you to watch the behind-the-scenes YouTube video in my show notes. It's great. He lists them independently and talks about the certain things that they added to the film. For the cast, there are only three main characters: Yoshiaki Umegaki as Hana, Aya Okamoto as Miyuki, and Toru Emori as Gin. I dug through the remaining VAs, and basically the entire cast has minimal voice work even after this film. However, one actor's work stood out like Wayne Enterprises' tower in the middle of Smallville. The dang taxi driver whose list is loaded. Before Tokyo Godfathers, and going in reverse, Koichi Yamadera was Meyerlink from Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. He's Kaji from both Evangelion series, Zabaru or Lord Raptor from Vampire Hunter, Ryoga from both Ranma 1/2 series, Tien-Shinhan from DBZ, not DB. He also had roles in Bubblegum Crisis, City Hunter, Dirty Pair, and his first listed role is in Megazone 23 from 1985. Some of his modern work includes Gentle Criminal from My Hero Academia, Togusa from the Get Sacked 2045 series and movies, North Number 2 from Pluto, Miguel from JJK Zero, many characters across several generations of Pokemon and Lupin the Third, and homeboy is the god of destruction himself, Beatus. And this is nothing for this guy's history. He's done so much stuff. He's dope as hell. Some of the film's accolades are: in 2003, it got the Excellence Award at the Japan Media Arts Festival and Best Animation Film at the 58th Mainichi Film Awards. In 2004, it got Domestic Feature Film Tokyo Anime Award. Whew. Hey y'all. A high-quality burrito in the back alleys of Shinjuku is akin to a winning lottery ticket. So if you don't want it spoiled, you best wrap this in foil and bury it in the snow outside your tarpaulin house. Tokyo Godfathers. There's not really a better spot to put this, so let's lead off with Kon's intent. It was not written to make you laugh out loud, but to chuckle. Some of the themes in this are synchronicity. Before production, Kon wrote on a piece of paper the phrase, Imi no aru guzen no ichi ni afureta sekai. A world full of meaningful coincidences. Kahn was a fan of Carl Jung's synchronicity, the definition of which is synchronicity events are chance occurrences from a statistical point of view, but meaningful in that they may seem to validate paranormal ideas. And something I didn't mention, I didn't write it down earlier, but I really encourage you, if you like this movie and you want to know more about it, to read the original post that Kahn made, because there's a whole lot of synchronicity in the creation of this. Absolutely fascinating. In this case, the catalyst for what seems to be a densely packed series of miracles is in the form of the infant, which was made to represent unconsciousness. By determining to help the child, they stepped out of their comfort zone, forcing themselves to reconcile with the decisions that led to this point. Had they put in no effort by taking the child straight to the police or ignoring it entirely, they would still be in the same spot and no problems would be addressed. There are obviously a lot of goofy small miracles in here as you watch the gang constantly avoid death. Things constantly fall or pass directly by Hana, and the entire gang leaves the convenience store right before an ambulance bashes in. The next theme is a little bit of classism, but showing how everybody struggles. The gang was made to be symbols of weakness, fragility, self-blame, and regret that everyone has. But the film perpetually shows the balance and imbalance in life. Gin chose this life voluntarily and feels like he's in a better place than the abandoned infant. The only place that Hana knows to return to is the bar that welcomes gay, trans, and apparently homeless people who were just beat to shit. The foreign Spanish residents seem equal to the homeless, with just slightly denser walls. Sachiko and her husband had money and toxic traits in spades and only wasted one of those. Despite the financial loss, they still have the capability to, quote, live better than the homeless, yet Sachiko sees no option other than suicide, and the husband lives in literal filth, even worse than the old homeless dude who was likely physically less capable of keeping a neater abode. The middle-class citizens on the train visibly acknowledged the gang's smell, while the very rich attendees and servants at the wedding never paid them any mind. The whole tale displays, like, every angle of life, good or bad. Next up is kind of the overall view of life. Kahn's intent was to capture an entire life in this short film. We have motifs of birth and death played by the infant and the old homeless man, with extra death by murder. We have genuinely problematic teenagers who beat Gin, and confused but well-meaning teenagers in Miyuki. The literal loss of a child, and successful motherhood. It is intended to show the entire flow of life, both good and bad. Some specific stuff to characters. Hana cannot have children and is determined to understand why a mother would give up a child. There's no specific ages, but Hana comes off as the oldest to me and is still seeking to better understand the people around her. Her desire to have a child is juxtaposed by Sachiko, as both are biologically incapable of having children. And I get that Sachiko had a miscarriage, but this seems to be her conclusion. But while one becomes a criminal and suicidal, the other is perfectly willing to not only give up the child, a gift from God, but safely deliver it to its home, by any means. And to kind of turn down the possible insanity of Hana, she was also willing to give Kyoko to the police if she was actually sick. It's not brought up anywhere, but the assassin being a man who's able to pull off a woman has to be intentional. He totally passed, and then there's Hana, who is still socially unaccepted Hana. For Gin, we learn over time that he was an alcoholic and I guess got off the wagon up until the wedding party. Seeing the man who swindled him started his process of reconciliation with a downward spiral into regression. The scene where he goes to the local police under the guise of dumping trash, then admitting he is the trash, is kind of hilarious, but is also maybe the first sign of him publicly showing weakness by admitting that he is his own problem. The tough guy facade is starting to wear down. He did bad things in his prior life, but has clearly seen improvement. His kindness as a man who has nothing towards another man who has nothing and is dying led to them getting a winning lotto ticket. In that same vein, and more importantly, he had been saving every yen for a long while, a mere $30, to give to his daughter to help her with whatever she needed and hopefully make amends. Then, when a friend needed it most, he gave it up, sadly, but not begrudgingly. And Miyuki had the nicest life of the three before choosing to become homeless and has a rough exterior similar to Gin. She's lost weight and a comfy bed, but doesn't complain. One of my favorite lines in the movie is when she doesn't want to get water for the baby, and Hana says, "Them's that works, eats." And she does get up, still, not begrudgingly. To me, her face always shows embarrassment, not disgust about any of this. And now that I've learned about doing homeless, the scene where she trades food for the baby book sticks out so much more. The dudes she bumped into were never going to use that book. They were, obviously looking to sell it, trade it, something. They definitely were going to use the entire Encyclopedia Britannica set they were carrying. But she still can't take. A debt is owed and she pays it in food. As a quick overall observation, all of these characters do a marvelous job of talking mad shit to each other in the beginning. Then when the chips are down, they all display more and more respect. This is something that Phil and Eric commented on, kind of being worried at the start of the film. And it is interesting because it's like when you know someone, when you're close, it's like this brotherly thing where you can just talk absolute mad shit. And what might be cutting deep to someone is not cutting deep to, a close friend. Now, the final character that we're going to talk about is Tokyo. How does one make a character out of a city? Kon admits Tokyo in the title is uncool and looks arrogant, but he wanted that to be the setting. He himself was only familiar with Shinjuku because of the Chuo line train stop there. The main approach taken to make this a unique experience was by making our crew wander in and out of the back roads, not staying in the neon-lit city that has been synonymous with Tokyo since the 70s at least. I think reviewer Mary Ma best describes this final character. In the mountains of trash bags left in back alleys and outside apartment buildings, the night is forced to remember the day. After the garbage trucks come along at the rising of the sun, the day need not remember the night. So good. Tokyo may not be biologically alive, but in reality, the more well-lit a place is, the more life is in it, and vice versa. Most of the film is overcast, and the homeless encampment is 50 shades of blue-gray, until we get inside their home, where it's warm and inviting. The Spanish housing and mansion also take us from the dreariness. There isn't even a ray of sunshine until the kamikaze saves Hana and Kyoko in the final act. The two color schemes intersect when Gin ends up in the alley after his beating. Cold walls on either side and Tokyo Tower beaming with warmth in the background. Kon really utilized animation to pay great respect to the darkness, not letting any detail get lost. Live action at the time could never have possibly captured this balance in Gin's scene. Either the darkness would fade to black or Tokyo Tower would be blown out. Or they would just do the day to night thing and it would look like a travesty. Some of the other accoutrements of this sprawling character were the signs and trash. The intent is to convey ordinary people with ordinary lives. They could have been left to squiggly lines, but the details kept it real. And the trash itself was a painstaking process to give reverence to an inescapable part of the city, made possible only by the animation software that allowed them to use multiple layers in a single frame. And again, I'm not trying to make this whole thing directly a sequel to Phil and Eric's review, but I love listening to their review because it is nice to kind of hear problems that people might have or things that people might not see. So in this movie, they mentioned that the animation looks old. I don't think it looks old. It's extremely crisp. It is a very good looking movie. It is intended to be done in this certain way. And there was a crazy amount of time that was spent on layering things to make them look so perfectly dreary. You can watch, there's other stuff at the time. Actually, most of the stuff from that time is probably way too goddamn bright because people stopped using black. And they were just like, yeah, sure, let's just make everything charcoal at darkest or maybe like a deep purple. But there is a lot of care that went into making the grungy parts look grungy. And making sure that every little thing can be seen so that Tokyo does not go unnoticed. I think the last thing in the themes are the character arc conclusions. This feels like a typical Japanese road film, but we get all these arcs wrapped up. Hana addresses her past after Gin's beating. It sucks that she lost her man, and maybe someday that'll be rectified. The looming issue was her poor health due to this rough lifestyle. We don't get to experience it, but it is nice to think that that arc was wrapped up after the film. Gin doesn't get any resolution with his wife, but he does get his greatest and dying wish to reconnect with his daughter. There is still just a touch of sadness in this. It's difficult to have a Japanese movie with a 100% purely positive ending. Miyuki's parents missed her like crazy and clearly still loved her. I think the final scene in the film is perfect because, kind of like the lottery ticket, we can deduce what's going to happen next. Before we leave, we have to address the kamikaze. This whole movie has been pretty realistic. Not real, but realistic, a point that Khan set out to make. Out of nowhere, the third act gets real dark, real quick. I mean, a guy was murdered earlier, but it was done in such a chill manner that there's no real impact on us or the characters. Honestly, the chase was like greater than the murder. Even Gin's beating becomes just another part of life. Where the movie begins with the discovery of a proposed divine child, it is neatly wrapped up with a divine wind. The downward spiral is literally uplifted by a gust and that single ray of sunshine, lowering Hana and Kyoko to safety in the least believable part of the film. But its inclusion is like a palate cleanser. It's a little bit uplifting because there's just that tiny bit of magic to pull you back out of all the craziness that was just happening. The smartest directorial move is that it's never addressed. Everything just keeps going. As do we. It's a Christmas movie. It's the final point to make, Phil. It's a Christmas movie. It's a magical child born on Christmas Eve, and the entire tale is about the strenuous yet magical journey life takes us on to better ourselves, growing relationships, and reunite with family. You need more colorful lights or something? A snowman? Come on. Come on. Now for some trivia and pop culture references. Kon, as mentioned earlier, was only familiar with the Chuo line in Tokyo, which begins west of and passes well beyond Shinjuku. He said he couldn't film this live action because he doesn't see things like that. Totally respect it. Thanks to all this research, I noticed a funny little joke. The billboard where Miyuki is spitting from, it says Angel of Tears. So people feel a drop, look up, then see this crying angel. Attention to detail, let me tell you. In order to properly grasp how the many layers of clothing would move on our main three characters, they held a cosplay for photos and film. Satoshi Kon played Hana, his wife played Miyuki, and the producer Satoki Toyoda played Gin. It's amazing. This is also in that same video. It's the beginning of the video with all of the behind the scenes artist stuff. The number 1225, Christmas Day, appears throughout the film. The number on the keyring, the cab fare, 12,250 yen, a stopped alarm clock, the address in the newspaper ad, and the cab license plate. Toward the beginning of the movie, when the trio passes by a convenience store, in the background you can see the theatrical posters for Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and this movie, Tokyo Godfathers. One of the things, I have not noticed this, and I read it after the fact, but I'm going to give it a rewatch and pay attention. But apparently there are buildings made to look like faces, appearing in over a dozen scenes, sometimes representing the feelings of the characters. Satoshi Kon describes this in his Tokyo Godfathers miscellaneous notes as follows. When I bought my new digital camera, I started taking pictures of such faces of the buildings for fun. But I thought it would be a shame to let it end up as just a hobby, so I decided to use them in this film as symbols of the pantheistic gods, the 8 million gods that have existed in Japan since ancient times. Now, what did I learn? A lot, obviously. Aya Kamikawa was the first trans-elected municipal official back in 2003. Tokyo Godfathers is also the name of a very entertaining Japanese band. Check out the song Coffee Rumba from the album Banditos. I think anyone could find something enjoyable from their discography. The band Moonriders, as mentioned for making the music for this film, is still recording. Their 2003 album Don't Trust Over 30 is somewhat experimental. They've been very active since the 70s, so I am not very deep into their catalog. Katsuhiro Otomo's World of Apartment Horror exists, and I've never heard of it. It's never come up in anything I've seen or read about him. For some of the references, it's a lot. There's several papers in here. But yeah, some of the sites, Austin Chronicle, Anime News Network. Most of these are just paper. There's a French interview. Constone.com is definitely one of the singular best resources for this because it's Con's website. It's like his blog post about this. So that was amazing. Definitely check these out, please. And then some of his references. He mentions the book Dream from a Cardboard House, Shinjuku Homeless Story by Nakamura Satoshi, published by Soshisha Sanzen. I got that right. And then another one was the movie Johns by Scott Silver. One of the inspirations here was the homeless man asking another homeless man for money. The thing that has kind of kept me going through all of this, shouts outs to Humano Sound and My Analog Journal, or MAJ, on YouTube. They have so much stuff, much music, different genres, different parts of the world, different eras. So it's just been nice to just like go on there, and almost every title is the most niche thing you could ever think of. And it's there, just waiting to be listened to. All right, so nacho business. What have I been doing all of this fucking time off? I played Little Nightmares 1 and got a little ways into Little Nightmares 2. I binged all of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Dragon Ball Daima, still releasing weekly. Go watch it. If you're a fan of the series, go watch it. The new Ranma 1/2. Go watch it. Just go watch it. Dandadan, very weird. That one's kind of like a moderate watch. Like if you really like anime, watch it. If you're not a fan of anime, who knows? Maybe don't watch it. If you're a big fan of tokusatsu, like Ultraman, definitely watch it. Tons of references in there. And even like some 80s and 90s Japanese pop culture references in there. I don't play Pokemon Unite anymore. I don't remember the reason why. I think it's just like their ranking system's kind of trash, because you spend most of your time playing bots. I'm maybe over halfway through Prey from 2017. That game is super awesome. Like a combination of BioShock and Alien Isolation. And then I started Cyberpunk 2077. All right. I'm tired. This was a lot, man. What did you think about Tokyo Godfathers? Have you seen any of the movies it was based on or referenced? Did you learn anything particularly cool? If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with your friendos. Not a Patreon kind of guy and have literally no idea how many people are subscribed to me. But it is motivating to open my weekly Buzzsprout email and see that for some unexplainable reason, I just got a ton of listens on an old episode. It's cool. It's motivating. Before we head out, I once again encourage you to check out the Wait For It podcasts episode on Tokyo Godfather, as well as Cinema Villains, The Neatcast, and Podcasters Assemble. Also, Doom Generation. I just started listening to them because they're in one of our groups. They're a lot of fun. If you want to contact me, twinbpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me on every social media platform, Twinbee Podcast. YouTube, I think you can search it. I don't know. I'm on YouTube. There's a video of this. I'm mostly looking at my screen because it's difficult, man. I'm working with what I got. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and I'll see you next year. And this is where the outro would go, but I still don't have one.